On Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Bechukoisai, in the year Tov Reish Chaf Beis, 1862, a Yid by the name of Rabbi Yisachar Doiv Eloi, also known as Rabbi Dr. Bernard Eloi, sat down in his home in New Orleans, Louisiana, and he penned a letter to two of the great poskim in Europe at the time, Reb Shamshul Farl Hirsch in Germany, and Reb Nosson Adler, the other Reb Nosson Adler, in London. Now, by way of background, Reb Yisachar Doiv Eloi was born in Kolin, Czechia, in the year 1814. He studied in Pressburg, in the Grosse Yeshiva, by the Heilige Chassam Sofer. In fact, he had received smicha from the Chassam Sofer. After spending several years in Pressburg, he spent a little bit of time in Italy. From there, he went to Budapest, where he received a PhD, a doctorate, from the University of Budapest. In 1852, for whatever reason, him and his small family decided to leave Europe, and they came to the United States of America. Now, by training, he was a rabbi and a doctor, which meant that he was very much fit to become a rabbi/doctor in the United States at that time. He immediately went to New York City, where he received the Rabbanus. Didn't last very long. From there, he went to Philadelphia. That also didn't last very long. From there, he went to St. Louis. At some point, he was a rabbi in Syracuse, in Baltimore, in New Orleans, and then finally, he ended his career in Cincinnati, Ohio. The reason that Rab Eloi wrote the letter that he wrote was because of a Maisa Shahaya Kachaya, that he felt he needed some legal halachic assistance from these great poskim in Europe. So he sits down and he sends this letter, gives a little bit of background to the State of the Union of the United States of the time. If you go through it in short, he describes it as being spiritually bereft, almost a spiritual wasteland. And then, in his letter, he comes to his punchline. He says, Hine, ze kemat shmoyne yerachim, me'oz nekreisi hine ir New Orleans, kehilu kedosh shari chesed. It's been 8 months since I was offered this job to be the Rav in New Orleans, the Kehilo Kedosh of Shari Chesed, Leishe Poyal Kisei Hayra, Ulahagid Lebeis Yaakov Ma Hashem Shoyel Mehem, and to preach to them and tell them what it is HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from them. V'Hashem Elikei Avi Hoya Imadi. You should know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the God of my father, was with me. Vehitzliach es darki, v'hoya uri'i lebracha. Asa pri kodesh, udvarei hay nishman v'nasim. You should know from the moment I came, I saw incredible success. Ki achesh darashti b'pam harishon, because after I darshan for the first time, yoisem me'arbam migdoilei hasoicherim. More than 40 of the merchants that lived in town, sagru dalsois chanusam yom HaShabbos. They agreed to shut their stores on Shabbos. V'lo yezidun oid lasois melacha b'yom HaKodesh. And they made a Kabbalah that they will no longer work on the holy day. And the more than 10 families who prior to this sermon were eating nevelos utrefes, they kashed their house to the point that any person that's a Yerushalayim, if he wanted to eat in their house, they could do that. It was the third day after that I arrived. One of my friends invited me to come break bread in his house. When I came to the courtyard of his home, I saw ducks. They looked a little bit different. In just the way that they appeared. Their physical makeup. Than the ducks that we're accustomed to eating. So we all eat ducks. It's a delicacy. You don't eat it every day, but it's something that makes its way onto the Jewish menu. I saw ducks, but they were different than the ducks that we eat. They have a name. They're called, in English, Muscovy ducks. And I have to be honest with you. I've gotten around, clearly, and I've never seen anything like this. So I asked my friend, tell me, what do you do with these ducks? What do you mean, what do we do with them? We eat them. So I doubled down and I asked him, who told you you're allowed to eat it? And he said, nobody. I mean, no one told me it's kosher because I didn't ask anyone if it was kosher. But he saw other people eat it. And he saw the shoichet, who's an erlich guy. He shechts them. And also the chazan, who's the chazan of one of the other kilas. Now appreciate that once upon a time, the chazan wasn't just a cantor. The chazan very often was the most knowledgeable person in the kehillah. He was like a quasi-rabbi. But the chazan in this other kehillah, and based on that, I assume that it's for sure. I mean, if all the people that are erlich eat it, so why would I assume it's anything but erlich? So says Rav Yiloi that after I did my own little bit of chakiros and drishos, and I started asking people, like, what are you being saimach on? Nobody was able to give me an answer. The best answer I got, and really the only answer I got, was I saw him do it, and he saw the other guy do it, and that guy saw the third person do it, and it was through that it was nespashet aheter. Miyad, immediately. Tzivisi la shoichet de kilasi. I instructed the shoichet of my kilush lo yilishchet miyayim zevahala minzeh, that he's no longer allowed to shech a Muscovy duck. V'gam bebeis hakneses dorashti v'asarti bar avzoi seila. Additionally, I got up and I darshaned and I said that these bar avzois, these Muscovy ducks, are not kosher. V'ata now, boy like eza noshim. There are people that came to me. V'shalu mimenu. What am I basing it on that I'm going ahead and I'm answering this? I mean, after all, it has all the same monim of a taira. I learned to sugi in chulin, and it looks like it checks off all the boxes. I told them that all the simanim that they have are a waste of time. And the reason is because we have a klal, that the only time we eat an oif is if there's a Messiah that it's kosher. And we don't have any Messiah from anybody reliable that this is kosher, and as a result, we can't eat it. A little bit of time passed. This chazan who was eating it, who was very vocal about the fact that it's okay. He walked into me, not through a shliach. He walked in, and he said, he says, we don't have a Messiah. The chazan whose job I took over, the chazan before me, he used to eat it. Not just that. He told them, Gama Yehudim be'ir Charleston, Yehudim be'ir Jamaica, they've also always been eating it. This type of Messiah is not enough. Number one, who was the of Bezdin of Jamaica that you're relying on, or of Charleston, South Carolina, that you believe is the one that can be kaveya the Messiah in a proper way? And not only that, there wasn't even a Talmud Shegiya L'Ra. And he said, besides, as it relates to this chazan that you're talking about, I did a little bit of research, and I found out that he was a Mechalel Shabbos Befarhesia. So the fact that the Frierdiker chazan used to eat the Muscovy duck, that to me is neither here nor there. Either way, Rav Doiber Lo, he goes through the sugya a little bit. He has a very long arichos. And at the very, very end of his letter, he says, even though I believe this undoubtedly an issue, but I promise some of the people who really desire this Muscovy duck that I'm going to sit down and I'm going to ask this shaila. I'm going to write a letter to the Chachamim in Europe, and if they're going to testify that there is a Messiah on this duck, or they'll be matter for some other reason, that I'm willing to be matter as well, it's for that reason. Ashachar is pnei adoini. Lahoshav li davar. Im to'isi bidvar mishnah oy b'shikol adas oy im kodin danti divrei hakoisev lekovet atayra hakoton yisachar ber ben adoini avi moiri v'Rabbi Yaakov Lev zeichet tzaddik levracha. This is the letter that Rabbi Dr. Bernard Iloi, some say Iloi by the way, wrote to Rab Shamshul Farrell Hirsch and to Rab Nosson Adler on Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Bechukosai, Tov Reish Chav Beis, from New Orleans, Louisiana. So, a few weeks later, Reb Eloi receives a response. He receives a response from Reb Shamshul Fall Hirsch, and he receives a response from Rabbi Nosson Adler, and they both gave him the same response, and that is, you paskind 100% correctly. There's no question in the world you cannot eat this Muscovy duck. It's not something that's okay, and it's for that reason, Yafa Danta, Yafa Hairisa, this is not okay. And Rabbi Eloi stood his ground like he had to do very often during his rabbinic career in a budding United States of America. And he said that as inconvenient as it is, but if I'm going to be the rabbi and I'm going to be calling shots, the Muscovy duck, although it's within the family of the duck, is something that's not going to be able to be considered kosher. Now, I think it's kedai to be misplainin for a second about this whole shaila. Let's look at it from 20,000 feet. Look at it from a very high level. We know the halach is, we just went through the sugyas, that although Chazal gave us simonim of a oif, and it's one of the more complex sugyas in Shas, but at the end of the day, when it comes to halacha l'maisa, it's actually very, very straightforward. The Mechaber and the Ramah say that the only time today anybody's allowed to eat an oif is if there's a Messiah that this oif is kosher. If there's no Messiah, as far as we know, even though it maybe checks off every single box in the world, the bottom line is, if there's no Messiah, the halacha is you would not be able to eat it. Stating that, as it relates to the Muscovy duck, there were really two arguments to be made that there's a Messiah. Number one, the Muscovy duck is part of the family of ducks. It's part of the general species of the duck. There's a Messiah that the duck is kosher, so mehechatesi, we should be mechalek between the duck and the Muscovy duck. It's part of the family of duck. There are so many subspecies within every single animal, every single creature. In the world of oifis, would we have to have a Messiah on every individual one? Or could we say there's a Messiah on the duck, Jews have been eating it forever, and as a result, this is something that should be okay. Additionally, the second reason to maybe be matter is there was a Messiah. There was a Messiah. The Jews in New Orleans were eating it. From Rav Dov Ber Eloi's Shaila, it's clear that the Jews in Charleston, South Carolina were eating it. It's clear the Jews in Jamaica were eating it. By the way, this is Montego Bay, Jamaica. So on the Caribbean island, Jews are eating it. Right? Jews have been eating this. This is something that Jews were eating. So, mehechatesi, to say that that's not a Messiah. Now, we don't know of any big famous Rabbanim that were ever Rabbanim in those cities, but there is something called Minig Yisrael Torah, and there is something called that if you find Jews, it's Nispasha the Heter in such a profound way, it's probably coming from somewhere. I mean, that's an argument we always make l'chumra. So mehechatesi, you wouldn't have a right to make an argument like that l'kula, right? We say that Yisrael afalpi they're not Nevi'im, but they're the B'nai Nevi'im, right? So to the extent that there was such a clear Messiah that people were eating it, just because we're not aware of any Gaivid or even a Tzur Rabbanan that lived there, but us not knowing of one doesn't mean there never was one. And shouldn't we assume Cheskes Kashrus that if you have all these Yidden who saw it by other people, it probably started B'Kodesh? But either way, Rav Dov Ber's intuition was that the Muscovy duck is different than a regular duck. It requires its own Messiah, and the Messiah of the Friedige Chazan of New Orleans, or of any Kehila Kedoshna that was in Charleston or in Montego Bay, is not enough of a Messiah. His netiya was that we have to lock this down. He owed it to his chevra to see what the Rabbanim in Europe were going to say. He sent it to two of the biggest poskim of the Dar, Shamshul Fall Hirsch, Rabbi Nosson Adler, and they both paskind like Rav Dov Ber paskin. At this point, it was already a Bezdin shal shloisha, and the psak was, at least in New Orleans, at least if you belong to Bernard Eloi Shtibel, that you were not going to be able to eat the Muscovy duck. Stating that, several years later, this tumult erupted again with regards to the Muscovy duck. Is it kosher or is it not kosher? And the Gedolei Yisrael that wrote Tshuvas, some of the most famous Gedolei Yisrael ever. And I think it's kedai to mention two of them. The first is a tshuva from the Heilige Avnei Nezer, and the other one is the tshuva that came from the world of Volozhin, the world of Lita, and that is from the Netziv. The Avnei Nezer, and this is in Shailos Tshuvas Avnei Nezer, Yeridea Simen Ayin Hey. This is how he starts. He says, "Bidvar ha'avozim asher huvu levarsha mi medinos ha'rechokim berussia ubehem shinuyim ma'avzim shalom." So he sets it up that there are these ducks that arrived in Warsaw. That's where this Shiloh had emerged. But where they come from? He said they came from Russia. I looked this up a little bit. The Muscovy duck is not native to Russia. The Muscovy duck is very much native to the Americas, Central America, South America, the southern part of the United States. That's where this is native. It's not native in Russia. I don't know, but it could be that being that the duck was called the Muscovy duck, the Avnei Nezer was just of the opinion that Muscovy is Miloshin Moscow, the Muscovy duck. I don't know. But either way, Avnei Nezer describes this duck as a duck that comes from Russia. It's just my guess. That it's the Muscovy duck, but it's not a Muscovy, it's kein Polish, it's kein English. This is an American duck. But the bottom line is that the Avnei Nezer talks about this duck that came, and he says, V'heim avozim me avozim shoinim. Right? The Kelim me Kelim shoinim. It's avozim me avozim. Different than regular ducks. Some of them are different than our ducks. They have longer necks than our ducks' necks have. There are those that have a gavshushis on their head. So what's a gavshushis? A gavshushis is like some fleshy bump. And if you see a picture of the Muscovy duck, they have them all over their head and on their nose. And at first glance, that seems to be a shinui gadol. And some of them have a black nose. The bottom line is, it's different. And here's the question. The question is, could we be saimich on the Messiah, the general Messiah of the duck, or are these ducks so profoundly different that the Messiah that we have is not going to be okay? And then the Avnei Nezer did what he always done, and that is, he wrote a brilliant tshuva. Just to mention two excerpts from the tshuva of the Avnei Nezer. The Avnei Nezer said, as it relates to the ducks, that their shinui is that their neck is longer than the other ones. Meaning that is their real shinui. Apparently they don't all look exactly the same. But the ones that have that longer neck, he said, from that standpoint, I'm not impressed. That's not something that bothers me at all. And he based it on a Gemara Mesechtes Bava Kama Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph. Amar Shmuel said, Avos, Va'avos habar kalayim zeh b'zeh. If you take the avos, that's the goose, and the avos habar, that's the wild goose, and you mate them together, it's going to be considered kalayim. Maskef lo Rav bar Rav Chanan. So Rav bar Chanan heard Shmuel's memory, and he said, "My time, what's the reason?" He said, "Ilay mishum dahai orich kuyei v'hai zuter kuyei." Is it because one has a longer nose and the other one has a shorter nose? Elameatoi bazoi gam lo parsa v'gam lo tayo dahai olim kuyei v'hai kotin kuyei hachinami davi kalayim zeh b'zeh. He had a kasha on that. It can't be, and because of that, the Gemara came out. There must be a different reason why it's considered kalayim. Said Avnei Nezer, I have a mefurish Gemara bava kama daf nun he, that if one goose has a longer nose and the other one has a shorter one, that wouldn't be considered a shinu le'inyan kilayim. So Zogt Avnei Nezer that the Heilige Chassam Sofer in a tshuva in Yeridei Siman Ayin Dalet said that when it comes to Messiahs of Oifis, to know whether two Oifis are the same or not the same, so that a Messiah from one would carry over to the other, the rule of thumb is, would it be considered kalayim in Hilchas Kalayim or not? If they're considered two minim in Hilchas Kalayim, well then the Messiah for one is not the Messiah for other. V'harai in Hilchas Kalayim, which is Dina Deiraisa, they're not considered the same min. If, however, in Kalayim it wouldn't be a problem, well then in Messiah, said the Chassam Sofer, a Messiah for one would be a Messiah for other. So said Avnei Nezer, Kfar Hoira Zoking, that if you have two oifas that fall under the same general species, but they're mishunas emizeh. But le'inyan kalayim, we know there wouldn't be a problem of kalayim. Well, then the Messiah for one is going to be mahana for the other. So the Chassam Sofer said Avnei Nezer, and the Gemara says in Bava Kama that the length of a nose is not considered a shinoi, even though apparently they were very different. One had this much bigger one than the other. But I feel that in and of itself is not a reason to make it a problem for kalayim. Well, if it's true for the nose, why shouldn't it be true for the neck? So if le'inyan the neck, I have a mefurish in Gemara Bava Kama Nun Hey that it's not considered a shinoi. Well, who adin as it relates to Messiah of oifis, kosher or not kosher, I don't think it's going to be an issue either. So said Avnei Nezer that my muscharishin is that the physical difference that was presented to me, at least as it relates to the longer neck, that's a mefurish Gemara with a psak from Marnach Chassam Sofer. Again, it's a tushtal, but the bottom line is, Bava Kama Nun Hey, Shal Shuvas Chassam Sofer Yeridei Ayin Dalet. Based on that, I don't think it's going to be an issue. Says the Avnei Nezer, K'vay teirasai kasav, sheyesh ba'oid shinoi. There's another shinoi. Shekoilam mishuna mishalano. And that is that the sound that the Muscovy duck makes is different than the sound that a regular duck makes. Hainu sheim heizerik tzas. They're a little hoarse. They don't have that bellowing sound like a regular duck does. V'ulai, and it could be zeh shinu gadol. That's already a shinu gadol. Leichashev kalayim, to make it a ready kalayim. And if that's the case, the Mesorah that we have for duck is not going to work. The fact that it's physically different, to me, I think a good sushal is bavakam nun hey, and the chuvas chasam soiv yerdei ayin dalet. But the fact that they're heizik tzas, the fact they don't sound like a regular duck, right? The fact that they don't quack like a duck. Well, if you don't quack like a duck, maybe you're not a duck. And based on that, I think that's a shinu gadol, and that's already something that I'm concerned about. Stating that, said the Avnei Nezer, I understand from the research that I did that in the small villages, they mate the Muscovy duck with regular ducks. And if that's the case, I have another koyach that Torah, and that's a Gemara Mesechtes Bechoros Daf Zayin Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, "V'Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi." Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, "Lo olam ein mesaberes lo tmeya min hatar v'lo tahira min hatame." A tmeya, animal that's a tmeya, that's non-kosher, cannot have a child with a kosher animal. And animal that's kosher, meaning if the female is kosher, she can't be misaberes min hatame. V'lo gasa min hadaka v'lo daka min hagasa. The same is true as it relates to a behema gasa versus a behema daka. They can't mate from each other. V'lo behema min chaya, v'lo chaya min behema, with one exception. Said Avnei Nezer, there's a Gemara that says that a behema tameya can't be misaberes from a behema tayr. If that's the case, if you're going to tell me that these two ducks mate from each other, and we know the regular duck is for sure kosher, because for that we do have a Mesorah, it must be, you're backing into a conclusion that the Muscovy duck must also be kosher. Because if it wasn't kosher, how could they mate from each other? How could one be misaberes from the other? It's a mefurish Gemara Bechoros Daf Zayin. So once I know that the duck is kosher, and I know this duck is misaberes from the other duck, Bal Karchach, Beli Suffolk, I know that the Muscovy duck, that other duck, must be kosher as well. Now, Avnei Nezer said, I know what you're going to tell me. That Gemara over there, Rabbi Shua ben Levi's memory is talking about behemoths. Mehecha Teisni, it's talking about oifes as well. Said Avnei Nezer, the Chasam Sofer that I quoted a minute ago, in Yeridei Simin Ayin Dalet, in that Shuva, he brings this Gemara, and he was mistapik in this very Shaila. And if you look, he wasn't 100% sure. But Daitoi Noita Lahakel. His Iker Tzad was to be Mekel, and to assume that just like there's a klal, that Lo'ilam Emes Haberes as it relates to a behemoth, the same is going to be true as it relates to a knife. If it's going to be true from a knife, and you know these two oifes made from each other, and you know one of them is kosher, so this easy arithmetic, you know by definition that the other one must be kosher as well. And then the Avnei Nezer said something so brilliant. He said the Chasam Sofer was misopik. Whether Rabbi Shua ben Levi's memory is true for oifes like it's true for behemoths. I think I have a raya berur. It's so subtle but so profound from the Gemara itself. He said, I was reading the Gemara, it bothered me a little bit. Rabbi Shua ben Levi, lo olam ein mesaberes lo tmeya min hatahar v'lo tahira min hatami. Tmeya is lashon nekeva, tahar is lashon zachar. Tahir is lashon nekeva, tameh is lashon zachar. Now, it makes sense because Ein mesaberes is who? The female. So lo'ilam ein mesaberes loy tmeya lashon nekeva, the female, min hatar, from the male. That's the zachar. V'loy tahira, nor the tahira female, min hatame, from the tummy. Right? We're referring to the female, the one who's either yet or not mesaberes, as lashon nekeva, tmeya tahira, and the zachar, who's not the one that's misaberes, as either tar or tame. But look at the next line of Gemara. V'loi gasa min hadaka, v'loi daka min agasa. Gasa is lashon nekeva, and daka is lashon nekeva. So v'loi gasa min hadaka, v'loi daka min hagasa. Why would they both be lashon nekeva? You should have one lashon nekeva, one lashon zachar. And he says the word dak is a real word in lashon zachar. Gas is also a real word. And by the way, as it relates to gas, he says if you're not sure, take a look at the sugyas in Masechtas Chulin. We had that oifa gas, right? We had the word gas last week in the daf. But the bottom line is, Freik Avnei Nezer, why isn't it by Tmei and Tahira we express it properly? The female's b'lashon nekeva and the zachar's b'lashon zachar. But when it comes to daka and gasa, so over there they're both mentioned b'lashon nekeva. The nekeva fashtech, but why is the zachar being mentioned b'lashon nekeva? Said Avnei Nezer. If you notice, the word behema is a lashon nekeva. The word oif is a lashon zachar. He says that's why you find even a behemoth that's a zachar is referred to as a behemoth. There's no other word to describe it. It's always b'lashon nekeva. And he brings kama rayas from Tanakh and from Mishnayos that we always refer to a behemoth, even a male behemoth, as a behemoth. There's no lashon zachar word for that. And the inverse is true for the oif. The oif is always going to be a lashon zachar. Even if you're dealing with a female, if it's not the oifa, it's always going to be the oif. We always refer to it be lashon zachar. So says the Avnei Nezer that as it relates to behema, you always find behema b'lashon nekeva. As it relates to oif, you always find oif b'lashon zachar. So zok there, if you hold that the halacha is that this idea of ein misaberes loy tmei min atar v'loy toir min atame is true sai for the behema and sai for the oif. So we had no choice but to be precise and say it in the lashon nekeva and the lashon zachar, because we wanted you to know that it's true not only for the behema, but it's true for the oif as well. Had it only meant behemoth, said Avnei Nezer, I believe it would have said like tmeim and atayra. Why are you referring to the male b'lashon nekeva? Because you always refer to the male b'lashon nekeva. I'll find you 100 rayas that you refer to it that way. But we wanted it to be clear that we don't only mean behemoth. So that's why we're getting involved in the lashon zachar and the lashon nekeva, because you shouldn't think that we're going to refer to the zachar as a lashon nekeva. No, because this is negay and not only behemoth. It's also negay oif. So you have to be precise with your language and mention zachar nekeva. The next line, again, you have to be the Avnei Nezer for all this. But said the Avnei Nezer, you want over there why it's all b'lashon nekeva? He says because take a look at the Gemara Masechtes Zvachim Daf Ayin Amid Beis. It's a Rabbi Yirmiyah Ibaya where it's mavur that a oif that's a gasa could be misaberes from an oif that's a daka. It's only by a behema. It's not true by an oif. That's why when it comes to the second memra, it's gasa and daka and gasa. What's the kash? You're mentioning the zachar b'lashon nekeva because by behema you're always allowed to mention the zachar b'lashon nekeva. I to be consistent. No, with dafka not being consistent. By daka and gasa and daka, it's only negay the behema. How do I know it's only negay the behema? Because that's Rabbi Yirmiyah in Zvachim Daf Ayin. So if I know it's only negay by behema, so behema is always lashon nekeva. So you can mention to the male as a lashon nekeva, but as it relates to tmei and tar and tummy, there it's also negay. So I don't want to talk b'lashon nekeva, because then I'm going to think it's only negay the behema. And his lashon is v'hine mizeh raya berura. Only the Avnei Nezer. This is a raya berura. This dikto kaloshin tmei tar and tmei, as opposed to gasa daka gasa. It's a huffle. It's so subtle. It's so subtle. This is classic Avnei Nezer. The bottom line is the Avnei Nezer writes back that I think it's kosher, the Muscovy duck. I don't think this is a problem. I don't think it's a problem. The shinui of its physical stature, take a look at Bava Kama Nun Hey and Chuvas Chasam Sofer Yeridea Siman Ayin Daled. As it relates to the fact that it's heiser iktas, the fact that it doesn't quack like a duck, that's a problem. For that, Bava Kama Nun Hey is not going to help you. But at the same time, they mate from each other. And if they mate for each other, B'chayr is Dav Zayin. Must be they're both kosher. Because Einat Mei, Misaberes Minat Toyer, V'leat Toyer, Misaberes Minat. So must be that they're both kosher. Maybe it's only true by Behema, not by Yoif. Not one Chasam Sofer, and that Shuva was Noitel Lahakel. And besides, I think I have a Raya Brumi, Dikta Kalosh, and Rabbi Shuva. Maybe this is the way it is. The bottom line is, the Avnei Nezer, with an incredible koyach that Teira said, the Muscovy duck, Dr. Eloy, you were way too from for your Kehila in New Orleans. You didn't have to be so machmer. I hope that this is something that's going to be okay. There's another tshuva, as we mentioned earlier. This tshuva didn't come from Poland. This tshuva came from Volozhin. That was written in the year Tafresh Mem Dalet. So if you're keeping score, this is 1884, and this was written by the Netziv. And the Netziv also was asked the same exact question. This Muscovy duck is making its rounds, quite literally, and the Rabbanim are being asked to opine and to try to figure out, is this kosher or is it not kosher? Now, the Shayel who asked this question to the Netziv apparently was a Greisa Talmud Chacham. His first name is Rapinchas. His second name is Yelis Savit Tregard. But this is who this Shayel is, and he's apparently a very, very big guy. Because in his Shayla, he was mechaven to a lot of what Avnei Nezer would write in his Tshuva many years later. So when he came to the Netziv, He already came with a whole fire to get tshuva. And it came to him telling him that I know it's different, but at first glance, I think there might be a little bit of a mahalach. The first thing he told the Netziv was, all these shinuyim that the duck has longer, I don't think this is an issue. Why? Bava kama daf nun hey, and tshuva's chasam sofer. Yeridei is simin ayin dalet. So we know the Indian kalayim, the size of your nose doesn't really make a difference, even if it's impressively different. Afilu hachi, it's not going to make a difference. And the Chasam Sofer already paskin that anything that's not a shinu in kalayim is not a shinu in your Messiah either. But said the Netziv, I have a problem with that. Because I was told, and the truth is Avnei Nezer seems to allude to this Metzias as well in his tshuva, that the Muscovy duck is physically a much larger duck. It's not just that the neck is taller. The actual height, the size, the ivarim are bichlal are bigger. And he said, if that's the case, I don't know if Bava Kama Nun Hey is a zushtal. I think you have to shtel to another Gemara, a Gemara that we're going to learn in a couple of weeks, and that is in Chulin Daf Ayin Tesam at Aleph. The Gemara over there is discussing a mule, specifically a mule that was misaberes from a sus versus misaberes from a chamar. What we need is Rav Papa's one line. Rav Ravam Udne Vizutra Gnufte. If it has large ears and it has a small tail, Bar Chamar, it's the son of a Chamar. Zutron Udne. If it has small ears, Virabba Gnufte, and has a large tail, Bar Susya, it's the son of a horse. Rav Papa said that if one is bigger and small, if the Ivarim are so profoundly different, in many ways, or in more than one way, then at that point, you can't shtel to Bava Kama Nun Hey anymore, because it must mean it's a different type of mule. One is the Bar Chamara, and the other one is the Bar Susya. So said in Netziv, I'm not so comfortable simply dismissing and rejecting this by saying, oh, Bava Kama Nun Hey with the Chuvas Chasam Sofer. Because to me, it's not just the neck that's different. They're different. I think one duck is the proverbial Rav Rav Udne V'Zutra Gnufte, and the other one is the proverbial Zutra Udne V'Rabba Gnufte. And if that's the case, one is a Bar Chamar, the other Bar Susya. These are two different meanings. In Kalayim, by the way. And if that's the case, it would be true in your Neufus as well. This was something that made the Netziv very uncomfortable. This shoyl, again, was a big lamdan. He also was mechaven to the Avnei Nezer's other koich der Teira. He stellt zu B'cheres Daf Zayin. So what about B'cheres Daf Zayin? I know they mate these ducks together. So to the extent that they mate them, isn't that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's memra? Right, it's a Mefurish memra from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Said the Netziv, Ivra. That should really be a raya chazaka, because the Rambam paskins this halach in Hilchas Machalos Asuros Perek Aleph, the ein tamei misnaber mitar klal. Ulefi pshat here, lefi pshat einaf gemina ben behema v'chaya lo'oif possess. In that one line, he's not like the Chasam Sofer, like the Avnei Nezer came out. Elo shebal korchach tzrichen anu lahatel safek gam bazeh. But I'm not sure this is going to work. Even though in Svaru lefi pshat mehecha teisi bi mechabtim behema noif, I have one problem. Shari elu machzikim bar avas habar l'tameh, because we are machzik that the bar avas habar as tameh fu part of a rava me avas shalanu. I've seen the avas and the avas habar. One is kosher, the other one's not kosher, and they procreate from each other. Must be, I don't know if I have a choice, but to say that as much as the pashtus of Rabbi Shmuel Levi's memory is that it's true not only by behemoths, but it's true by oifis as well, but the chush is not that way. And if that's the case, what conclusion do we have to draw? We have to draw that Rabbi Shmuel Levi only said it by behemoths, not by oifis. So I agree with Fiapshat, you're right. And by the way, the Chasam Sofer said, even though he doesn't quote the Chasam Sofer, and we know years later the Avnei Nezer would write this tshuva with a raya nifla from the Dikta Kalosh and Losh and Zach Losh and Nekeva. But at the end of the day, in Netziv Sned, I have a little bit of problem with Mitzias. But said in Netziv, I have another Gemara you could tell to. And that is this is so brilliant. A Gemara Bava Mitzia Daf Tzadik. It's fun, like when all these Gemaras are on your fingertips, right? So a Gemara Bava Mitzia Daf Tzadik Aleph on the base. Mamash amazing. Rav Ashi said, the following question was asked to me by Reb Nechemya, who was the Reish Galusa. So Rav Ashi says, the Reish Galusa asked me a question. He came with a hanacha, right? Very often you ask a kasha, you come in with a big hanacha. So he came with a hanacha. His hanacha was that being that you're not allowed to mate two animals that are different minim, so based on that, you wouldn't be allowed to put them together in a stall, put them together, in a matzav of yichud, because if you're going to put them in a matzav of yichud, so they might end up doing an avera, and it's going to come out, you were geirim on some level, this Isser Kalayim. So this is the hanacha that the Reish Galusa makes. So he comes to Rav Ashi and he says, I have a following shaila. Can I take male of a certain animal, take the female of that animal and also the female of another type of animal and put them all together. What's the shaila? Kiven de ikka mina basa mina gar. Do we say in this case you have to be worried about yichud? Because why would the animal go and be roiveya the enamina if he could be roiveya? Then I don't. Afilu hachina. Says the Gemara upashti li'isur. Rashi said I was poshit le'isur. But like hilchasam, not because I think there's a real halachic issue. I think there's no halachic issue. Mishum pritzusa da avdi. But it was because of a maitza prisus. If you take a look at the Rishonim say Rav Ashi was maskim to the hanocha that really you're not supposed to mate. You're not supposed to put in a state of yichud animal together with another animal that are two different minim. But in this case, where you're putting it together with your min, even though Rav Ashi said I'm being machmer, that's the piece that he said is the loike hilchasa. Mishum pritzusa, I didn't like this whole shayla, I said it's awesome. But mi'ikra din, it really wasn't a problem. Why not? The reason is because the svara of this Nechemya Reish Kalusa, his havamina was an accurate havamina. As much as we're concerned that the animal might be reveya eina minoi, but if minoi is there, why would he go to eina minoi if minoi is really there? So listen to what the Netziv said. You want to eat the Muscovy duck? This is what I would tell you to do. I would tell you, take a Muscovy duck and put it together in a deer with another Muscovy duck, meaning male and female, and then put a female regular duck. And see what happens. If the Muscovy duck is not going to be mavchin between the other Muscovy and the other duck, so if that's the case, it's all the same man. Because we have a Messiah based on Bava Mitzvah, it's on the Galafam and Beis, that for sure it's going to go to Minoi versus Eine Minoi. If you're going to see that it's going to go to the other Muscovy and not to the other, then you know exactly what you have. So he said to simply rely on B'chayris Daf Zayin, even though I'm masking that's the pashtus, but I'm not so comfortable because I don't know what to do with the Avaz and the Avaz Abar. So maybe it's only true by Behemoth, not by Oifus, and I agree with you, it shouldn't be different by Oifus. But I have a different Gemara that I can invoke. I can invoke this Gemara Bava Mitzvah Daf Tzadik Aleph on the base, and based on that you can have a koyach there. But either way, the Netziv sits down and the Netziv tells him, you're asking me my opinion, I'm going to tell you what I think. I think that as it relates to the Shinuya Aguf, there's a problem. It's a problem. I don't think Bava Kama Nun Hey is a Tzushtal. I think Chulin Ein Tessa Tzushtal. They're two fundamentally different. It's like the two types of mules. I don't think you can get away with that. In terms of B'chayris Daf Zayin, I don't love that either. I love it for Behemoths, I don't love it for Oifus. However, but Mitzvah Tzadik Aleph on the base, that's an Eitzah. But then the Netziv said a Dover Nifla. Then the Netziv said, Ifra, I want you to know, Kol Zem Hoyabal Lefonai Mirosh. If no one had ever eaten the Muscovy duck, and someone just discovered it, and you came to me and you asked me, can you eat it or not? I would have written to you what I just wrote to you. This would have been my psak. Aval acha shekvar noha gula achla. But being that the minig is apparently in different places that Jews eat the Muscovy duck, and probably it was done al pi ras chacham shenir lo shumin avas hatar v'huchzugu bazel lehetera ein lanu la'isram ula'hitzi laz al aviseinu she'achlu oich tamei chas v'shalom. It would be inappropriate for us to go ahead and be mitzi laz. You don't know? I don't care. Klal Yisrael are afal they're not neviim, they're bnei neviim, and therefore if there's such a messiah and so many kehilas that Jews have been eating it, probably it started somewhere, and you have no choice but to give it the benefit of doubt. And then I'm skipping a little bit. He says v'teida. I'll prove it to you. Sheheter ha'oif indik, the turkey. She'anu oichlin hayu harbe ma'arim aleim b'shal shehiviu mi India. He said when they arrived from India, there were a lot of people that were ma'arer. V'lei hayim misneiros al kashrus, and there was no messiah on the kashrus. V'gam oid hayoim yesh machmirim uparsha mehem. People today won't eat turkey. Umikol mokim kfar nagu leheter. They ain't poitza peh. No one's moich against people that eat turkey. Because there's a chazaka of heter. This whole chazaka started very not okay. They showed up from India, people started eating it. So what exactly is the chazaka? The teretz is, this is the way it works. Once it's chuchzik that people operate a certain way, that already gives it a koich that tera. The bottom line is, Davnei Nezer and the Netziv, they both came out lahakel, not for the same reason. Davnei Nezer was noit lahakel based on the Gemara in B'chayris Daf Zayin. He felt that being that Rabbi Shua ben Levi gave us his epic memra, la'olam emes haberes lo'itmei min atar v'lo'itorim min atamei v'lo'ishna behem v'lo'ishna oif, like the Chassam Sofer was noit in his truva, and like Davnei Nezer himself thought he had this raya mamish berura v'gemura v'nachayna from the diktok haloshan of the Gemara. So based on that, he felt that being that these two ducks mate from each other, checkmate, and as a result, this is something that's going to be okay. the Netziv wasn't so comfortable with this. The only way he was willing to work with this was in the event that you can up the ante a little bit and you can experiment it per Rav Ashi's psak in the Gemara Bava Metzia Daf Tzadik Aleph on the base. So take 2 Muscovy ducks and a regular duck, or 2 regular ducks and a Muscovy duck. Work with that a little bit and see how it all plays itself out. And based on that, you'll be able to. But he said, I don't care, there's a Messiah. And because of the fact there's a Messiah, so based on that, this is something that's going to be okay. So as much as Rabbi Yisachar Doiv Ilui came out l'chumra, and when he sent his shaila, the 2 Gedolei HaPoskim of Europe, Reb Sham Shafal Hirsch and Reb Nosson Adel, they came out l'chumra. But years later, the way the Gedolei HaPoskim would work through this sugya in their tshuvas was very, very much with a koich that Torah. Either you have this blearing raya based on the Gemara in Bechiros Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, or based on the Messiah, and even a lot of studim that maybe these shinuyim that we're experiencing, that we're seeing, aren't really such shinuyim. I didn't research this properly, but I will tell you that there is a postscript to this, and that is, this shaila came to the desk of Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank. It's actually printed in a small tshuva in Har Tzvi on Yeridea, and Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank said that, I think he said there's a Messiah from Shmuel Salant, that Rav Shmuel Salant was Mekel, and the minig in Eretz Yisrael, for sure until very, very recently, was that they shechted and ate the Muscovy ducks. As much as this Muscovy duck came with so much tumult, and there was so much talk about it, but at the same time, the minig Yisrael played itself out with a koich that Torah about 15-20 years ago. There's articles written on this. There was some sheikhtim, I think it came more from the Chassidish world, that maybe it's not okay. So I think the minig has changed and shifted in recent years. But again, I'm driving out of my lane right now. But the bottom line is, for sure, the minig Yisrael was to go with the psak of the Amni Neisner, to go with the psak of the Har Tzvi, to go with the psak or of Tzvi Pesach Frant, and that was to treat the Muscovy duck like a duck. And if a duck is kosher, this Muscovy duck is going to be kosher as well. But I just thought, Dover Be'itay Matov, as it relates to just the whole story of Rabbi Dr. Bernard Ilui, Rav Dov Ber ben Rabbi Yaakov Ilui, Talmud of Chassam Sofer, becomes a rabbi in early America, and really, just his whole story is a fascinating story. Truth is, years ago, I had discussed Rabbi Ilui with Rabbi Bienenfeld many times. Rabbi Bienenfeld's actually the only person I know that has the original sefer called Sefer Mechemes Alikim, which are the tshuvas from Rav Dov Ber Ilui. He has an original copy of the sefer, and he's someone that he had studied over the years. More recently, I got a hold of a book. It's a doctoral dissertation that was written by Dr. Moshe Sherman. He's a history professor at Touro College, and he wrote his dissertation on Rav Bernard Ilui. I went through it cover to cover. It's fascinating on so many levels. By the way, there's a lot of other halachic issues that Rabbi Ilui was at the forefront of, all very worthy of going through. Be'in is some fascinating discussions. The most famous one is the Muscovy duck. It's most famous by a mile, but there are other very, very important and other very prominent ones as well. But I was going through the book, and I put some stickers by some Marmakim, a long time ago, in case we ever got to the point where we were going to discuss Rabbi Ilui as well. And preparing for the shir, I went back and looked at the stickers. And one of the stickers was excerpt of a sermon that Rabbi Ilui gave in his Kehillah. At that point, he was in Philadelphia, and this was in Chodesh Elul. It was in the year, it was in 1853, I'm sorry, it was printed in Chodesh Elul, but this was in the year 1853, and he gave it on July 2nd. Now, I tried tracking down to see if I can get my hands on the original article, the drasha. So it was actually printed in the Occident. So for those that know, the Occident was Isaac Leeser's. Isaac Leeser is one of the founding fathers of American Jewish history. His story is an incredible story that Be'ez Hashem we have to tell at some point. But Isaac Leeser, he had this publication, the Occident, where he was fighting Askola, and he was fighting a lot of things that were going on. Either way, it's printed in the Occident, and thanks to the help of Simon Springer, who was gracious enough to join us now. So Simon Springer, who's doing incredible work trying to rehabilitate and bring back a lot of these old American rabbis that the world's forgotten of. And really, if you think about them, they planted so much of the seeds that, ultimately Klal Yisrael was able to grow on. And you read their stories, and some of them, the Mesiras Nefesh they had for Torah, it is mind-boggling. And it's mamish such a chaval al da'avdim v'lo mishtachim. But the bottom line is that Nachi introduced me to Simon Springer, and Simon Springer, within a minute, was able to get me a clear copy of The Accident. This is in Volume 11, it's number 6. I had a feeling that he gave it on July 2nd. The excerpt looked really, really good. And I said, Dava bi'itay matayv, it's 250 years. Medina Shal Chesed, right? Old Rabban Am Yisrael is Medina Shal Chesed, from the founding of this country. And who knows what's going on in this drasha. So I'll just share with you a few excerpts. Freedom, the gift of God. That's the title of the sermon. An address by the Reverend Dr. Bernardi Lowy, delivered in English at the synagogue Rodef Shalom, Philadelphia, on July 2nd, 5613, which is the year 1853. The threefold cord shall never be broken. The threefold bond of liberty, equality, and fraternity shall never be torn asunder. We read in our lesson of this day as follows. So he starts reading from the parsha. The parsha talks about how you have to treat the ger, the convert, properly. And he says it 3 times. Chukas achas lochem lo ger hagar. Chukas oilam lo dereisechem koger yeh lifnei Hashem. And finally, Torah achas umishpat echad yeh lochem v'lo ger hagar itchem. Again, v'chut ha-meshulish lebimheri notic. 3 times the Torah talks about how even the stranger who lives in our land is somebody that we have to be sensitive to. In this announcement is distinctly contained the will of God, that the land he had given to our ancestors should be a land where freedom was to dwell and righteousness to prevail. All the inhabitants of this glorious and first republic of the world should be equal before the Lord, because he is the Father of all. And the stranger who wished to live in the land of promise should enjoy the same rights and the same privileges as every one of the congregation of Israel. One right and one law shall be for you and for the stranger that dwells with you. Such was the basis upon which the new state of Israel was founded. And these words remind us of the day, which is fast approaching for us. It is the 4th of July, the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the day in which the same words were pronounced by the illustrious founders of our glorious republic. One law and one right shall be for all men. Let us therefore, my brethren, today, when we are assembled to celebrate the Sabbath day and to thank God for the creation of the world, also thank him for the creation of this happy state of freedom and peace. Let us today commemorate this great, brilliant, and happy day which sealed the independence of the country we live in. Let us gratefully remember the day which ushered in the great event with which the happy history of our country commenced. Honored and remembered forever be that day on which the father of the land of freedom first unsheathed his sword to redeem his country from the iron yoke of foreign oppressors. He goes on and on. I'm going to skip a little bit. My friends, a poor speaker as I am, I shrink from an attempt to trace out all the happy circumstances which are closely connected with the 4th of July, 1776. I shrink from the attempt to be a speaker of a great nation whose land is a blessing to mankind, to whose sons no branch of knowledge is foreign, and which, although young, claims for them in every kind of progress a place among the foremost. I feel myself still less able to describe the heroic deeds and disinterested services of men like Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and Franklin, men who will forever live in the hearts of their countrymen, men who will forever be remembered and venerated as lions in war, as meekness itself in peace, and as strong barriers of justice and truth against violence and fraud. Indeed, I shrink from the attempt to sketch a striking picture of all this, but all I can do is remind you that among the many millions of inhabitants of this happy land, none should solemnize this day with more grateful feelings than the Jews. On this day, we should recall in all their intensity emotions which the oppressed, the weak and homeless feel on finding a powerful protector and an hospitable asylum. On this day, you should gratefully recollect, that is, in this great and happy day, which fully compensated us for all the dark deeds of blood, for all the galling manacles of slavery, for all acts of oppression and tyranny which despotic governments had for ages inflicted upon us. And lastly, this day should be put us in mind that we live no more in the lands where bigots rage and fanatics rave, where bigotry traces out the march march of its persecution in footsteps of blood. And superstition, not bad for someone whose first language is not English, by the way, and superstition employs all its terrors to nerve the arm of the tyrant. We live no more in the lands where despotic oppressors prohibit upon pain of death the practice of our religion. No, we live now on freedom's soil. And this day has fulfilled the prophecy. I will carry you upon eagle's wings. The powerful eagle of America bears us upon his protected wings. Religious liberty is given to us. Let us therefore use it only in such a way that it may make us worthy of the title of free men, of the free-born sons of Israel. Only in this way can we duly appreciate the precious legacy which the illustrious founders of this republic bequeathed to us. And may the great Father on high, who dwells in this house, give us his blessing. May he bless us farther and all the inhabitants of this happy land with liberty, peace, and brotherly love, that our last generation may still gratefully commemorate the 4th of July and with a joyful heart proclaim, Zeh hayoim asa Hashem nagila v'nismach habai. This is the day which God has made. Let us be glad and rejoice thereon. Now this is a rabbi speaking to a kehillah in Philadelphia, 1853. And he's trying to get the chevra to realize what they have. The gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them. That 250 years later, although we're hanging on for dear life, we still have. And really, if you go through the sermons of the great rabbis that were the founding fathers of this country, and by the way, I don't mean the Aliyah of the late 19th century, early 20th century, when millions of Jews immigrated from Europe. And Kal v'chomer, we don't mean, post-World War II, when you had Gedolei Olam like Rav Moshe and Reb Aaron and the Satmarav and other mashpiyim that really, really brought Torah to America. But go back to the beginning of time, where there were thousands of Jews, and then at some point tens of thousands of Jews that were living in the country full stop. And obviously, the United States of America being a Protestant country, so obviously to be a Jew and it was not an easy thing to do. And they fought. And then when the Haskalah came in the 1850s, they fought tooth and nail. Yidden like Rabbi Gershom Seishes, who, if you know, you know, he's the rabbi of the of the Revolutionary War. Isaac Lees, who we mentioned earlier. Abraham Rice, who's a Chassidah Prisha, who's a rabbi in the 1840s, 1850s in Baltimore. Morris Rafal, who's a rabbi in New York City. We mentioned Dr. Bernardi Lowy. They're unsung heroes, the Mesiras Nefesh they had to plant the earliest seeds. This was like the foundation beneath the foundation. But at the end of the day, when Jews immigrated to America in the 19th century, as much as it was schwer to be a Yid, but there was an Orthodox Jewish infrastructure. Yeah, maybe there weren't schools. It wasn't perfect. We all know that. But at the same time, there was a lot of infrastructure. And when you read their stories and you read the fight that they fought, it's absolutely incredible. And one of the themes that I've seen in all these sermons, not just from Rabbi Lowy, some of the other Rabbanim we mentioned and others as well, is that they were trying to express to their congregants and try to spin what was going on in America, for the good. On the one hand, America was a dangerous place. The freedom came with a lot of sakana, but at the same time, it came with a lot of opportunity. Because for the first time, almost in forever, the Jew was bound by the First Amendment, which is religious freedom, and if he wanted to practice his religion and to be a Yid, it was something that he was very much allowed to do. And these Rabbanim in their sermons would explain to the Jew, you don't realize what you have. You don't understand what your brethren in Europe are dealing with. You don't realize what a gift that you were given. And July 4th was a symbol for the Jew as religious freedom. We don't appreciate it so much today because there's religious freedom pretty much in the entire world. But in a world where there was no religious freedom, July 4th was a day, it was a symbol of religious freedom. And that's very much the spirit of this incredible, epic sermon that Rabbi Lowy gave. Just as a postscript, how did Rabbi Lowy's story end? So he passed away on June 20th in the year 1871. Reading from Dr. Sherman's book, Elohi's life was brought to an untimely end through a sudden violent accident. On June 20th, 1871, he traveled to nearby Lebanon, so this is Lebanon, Ohio, in order to pay his taxes. While riding home with his youngest son, the accident axle of his buggy broke off, throwing him and his son to the ground. The child was not hurt and immediately ran for assistance. Eloi, however, was taken to a nearby residence of a friend where several physicians attended to his injuries. The fall had apparently dislocated a vertebrae near the neck, causing him near total paralysis. The following day, Wednesday, June 21st, 1871, he expired after 24 hours of intense pain. He passed away on Gimel Tammuz of the year 1871, and in a very sad, ironic twist, a man whose legacy is known from the Muscovy Duck, a sugi in Perik Elu Treifis. He died from a dislocated vertebrae. He died from one of the more prominent treifis that I mentioned, the sugya of Elu Treifis. Either way, Yehi Zichrei Baruch and Sheyiyu Sifsoisav Doivavais Bekever.